Hello guys, how are you? My name is Nagendra Bisht and I'm a YouTuber and I bring videos to you which are all about books, some book reviews, commentaries on what I liked about books and why, tips and tricks to improve your book reading skills, how you can actually get into this habit of book reading. But before that, we'll talk about what I read in this month of March. The first book that we're talking about, in fact reviewing, is Potty Rules of Love. Elif Shafak is the author of this book. She is a famous writer, Turkish writer who's written a number of books. In this book, she talks about a character called Ella who has lost the feeling of love in her life. She's around 40 and she has a family. She's well settled. Her husband is earning well, but somehow the love of her life is not there. I mean, the love in her life is kind of not there, and she is becoming a dissatisfied, kind of empty woman, and she doesn't like it. And love comes to her in the most unexpected ways. She gets introduced with the feeling of love in a way that she could have never experienced. So the story travels 800 years back, when in 12th century there existed or there lived a character, in fact somebody whom a lot of people know about already, Rumi. Rumi, that you have heard of. If you have not, then you should study Rumi. He is the one who lives in the city of Konya, probably in Middle East somewhere, and that's where the story travels, and that's where Ella finds her true love. So what happens to her? How does that happen? You will only get to know when you read the story. And these two stories, of one of Ella and other of Rumi, run parallel to each other in this book. And the writer, the author, Elif Shafak, has beautifully woven, in fact masterfully woven these two stories and brought about a feeling of love that we all want in our life. In fact, Ella wants in her life, and how she understands it as the story unfolds eventually. Now, that is the beauty of this character, that you will, that is the beauty of her writing, that you will love how she talks about Rumi, who is a famous scholar who teaches students in the city of Konya. He's well respected. He has a wife, he has a beautiful family, but there's something lacking in it. And he meets Shams of the Breeze, who is a wanderer, who is a Sufi. If you know what Sufis were, well, Sufis were this, wandering saints who would, spread the message of love and talk about God, which is different from what people were teaching at that point in time. And Shams of the Breeze is a different kind of a Sufi. And when he encounters Rumi in the city of Konya, actually he gets to meet him because he has his visions through which he understands that his partner is in city of Konya, and he travels all the way from his city of the Breeze to meet Rumi. So what all happens, and how Ella actually gets this inspiration of love through this story, that you will get to know when you read this book. It's a beautiful book. You should definitely read it. And the second book that I read was The Promise by Damon Galgut. It is the Booker Prize winning book of 2021. I read it with a lot of expectations, and boy, when I finished reading it, I had a mixed feeling. When you read a book of stature of a book which is won Booker Prize, you have different expectations from it. You think that, for me as a reader, I look at undercurrents of brilliant writing which hooks you, which kind of keeps you in that zone even after you have read the pages, and it just keeps coming back to you, those characters, those lives. You want to experience them again and again in your head somewhere. And also a perfect plot. So if these two things are there, in fact for me that book becomes a more enjoyable book, and I really don't care if it has won a Booker Prize or not. But since it has won Booker Prize, I thought like, let me see what it is all about. And I wanted to read about South Africa. It has undercurrents of apartheid, which is something probably you know. If you don't, then please know exactly what is apartheid. You will get to know. So this book is about South Africa. The backdrop is apartheid and obviously what's happening with a family. But here in this book, apartheid is showed in passing. It's not fully immersed. Black people are either shown as corrupt or victims. And yet this book talks about the story of Swart family. Swart family lives on a farm outside Pretoria, which is a city of South Africa, and they are white people. Here the writer goes at lengths to explain as to what is wrong with the Swart family, the white family, and why death would make them do what their lives actually didn't care to. Getting confused? Okay, let me explain to you. It talks about the Swart family, which is, again, as I've told you, a white family, and the matriarch of the family, Rachel. She is dying, and on her deathbed, she takes promise from her husband, Manny, who is the head, that after her death, the servant, Salome, should be given the house that she's living in at present. Salome is a black woman who serves the white Swart family, takes care of them, takes care of their children. In fact, she took care of Rachel, who was dying. And how this promise is not kept, and as time passes, the deaths in Swart family happen and this promise is forgotten. And so is the promise of new South Africa post-apartheid, which is tottering, which is struggling to keep pace with the new world, the new South Africa that they wanted to build. This is what Wright talks about off and on in South Africa, what is happening. But the main character of this book is this family, the Swart family, what happens to them. You can also check out my review on Instagram. I have put a long review of this particular book on Instagram. You can click on the link in the description below. But apart from that, talking about this book, as I told you, this book gave me a mixed feeling that kind of made me understand, made me think about why, what makes these books a great read. I started searching for the meaning of these words, the underpinnings, the undercurrent of what it is all about. And I kind of thought that this writer is talking generally about sadness in this book, sadness of the character, sadness that engulfs the Swart family, especially the two children. There are three children of Rachel and Manny, and they are Anton, Amor, and Astrid. Please forgive my pronunciation if it's not correct, but this is what it talks about generally, and how especially the two children, Amor and Anton, as they grow up, what shapes their worldview or what shapes their thought in this backdrop of South Africa, which is struggling with its own problems, apartheid, and how the current government, which is a new government of people who are black, are actually governing the country, and what all goes around in their lives is what it talks about. I will not read much of the plot, but so much so that it is mostly about this promise that they have given to the lady has given, or in fact the man or the head of the family has given to his wife, and eventually it passes down from parents to children. And what happens then? Does she get a home eventually? And Salome, coming to Salome, she is a black woman who serves the white Swart family. She's working there forever. I mean, since she has actually stepped out to do something in life, and she is not the owner of that house. So just imagine a scenario. This is South Africa. The original inhabitants of this country were blacks. The white came from outside, the Dutch mainly, and they settled in South Africa. They are the people who are occupying this land, which is eventually, they are the rightful owner right now as per the law which they have made. But ironically, they are giving a land to a black woman which was originally her ancestral land. I mean, the land of all the black South Africans. As a reader, I look for closure, and I kind of did not find that closure, that feeling of, oh, okay, so this is how this character is given, is justified, is given its due. That did not happen to me. There are also different characters. A character of beggar, which I did not understand why his story is there. At least for me, I could not figure it out. It was randomly put in the story in the later pages of the story, and it just stayed there and ended somehow. So if you've not read this book, go read this book. And if you have read this book, please tell me how much did you like it? Did you like it at all, or did you like it very much? Or you think what I've told you is not something which you feel about. If you do want to, please comment. The promise. Now the third book that I read is it's not even a book, it's an essay, also an interview. What If We Stopped Pretending by Jonathan Franzen. Jonathan Franzen talks about climate change that's happening all around the world. And according to him, what he says is that the world had its share of life, and eventually it will end sooner than later. And he talks about how global warming is affecting all of our lives, and all the developed country, he lives in America, so he obviously is, not even pretending to think that America is doing its bit. According to him, America is not doing enough to take care of climate. They just do lip service. And all the other developing countries as well, India and China, and how smaller countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, or countries in the Atlantic Ocean around it, small countries, or in Africa, will bear the brunt of this climatic change. Once the temperature rises in about 30, 40, or 70 years, whenever it happens, we don't have a chance to survive. This planet has no chance to survive. What he says, that we can do a little bit of here and there by making sure that we win small victories, because the time that we have already lost to make the real change to save this planet is over. And we can just do a bit for our planet, like, taking care of wildlife, making sure that we don't really pollute the environment more, making sure that there are laws, stringent laws, that bring down the global warming. Our carbon footprint is reduced somehow. So initially, if you read the first few pages, you kind of capture that thought. He gives examples of how the temperature has increased. He goes to a place in Berlin, in Germany, and how the wildfire has actually created havoc there, and they cannot actually visit the birds, I believe, that he wanted to see. And then in the latter part of it, he talks about, actually there's an interview where somebody's questioning him, there's a question, and then he gives answer to it. So all of that is captured, what I've just told you, the summary of it all. So it's a small book. You can even call it a novella, but again, it's a fiction, so I won't call it a novella. It's 70 page, and you can read it in just one sitting. But it's a good kind of book that you would appreciate if you like to read about these kind of topics. And the fourth book that I want to talk about is A Passage North by Anouk Arudpragasam. He's a young writer in his 30s. This is his second book. This is a entirely different world that I actually read about. It is a story of Sri Lanka, and the writing style, first of all, the writing style of this author is pretty different from what I've seen in recent times, in the past 1 year that I have been reading books. I mean, that I've been reading books since forever, but this writing style I have never encountered. He writes in long passages. In fact, one sentence starts and it covers almost half the page, sometimes even more than half the page, and then it ends. I mean, you are in for a writing which is without any limits. So you have to really build your thought process around that writing. You don't get used to the writing right away, but as you read the pages, you get used to it. Well, he's a young writer and he talks about a different experience altogether. This is, I would say that this book is a story within a story where the writer talks about his experiences as a young Sri Lankan who is living in south of Sri Lanka in Colombo, the capital city of the country, and he is a Tamilian. He has roots which is in the north of Sri Lanka, which is where the Tamil rebels are fighting a battle against the government for the autonomy of that part of Sri Lanka, which should be their homeland. So he is part of that culture, that community, and he lives in Colombo a comfortable life. And how his experience as a Tamilian who is not a part of the battle, what all he soaks in from internet as a young guy when he is growing up, and what all he feels, this particular book talks about. And so the government crushes the operation of these Tamil separatists after 23 years of civil war. So in this backdrop, this young Sri Lankan, the protagonist, Christian, life goes back and forth, where he has his own set of experiences, where his grandmother, who's old, of course, she's old, and how her health is deteriorating. He muses, he thinks about that, and how another woman who is brought in the family fold, or brought to take care of the old grandmother, is also suffering mentally in her own way. Her name is Rani, and she is also part of north of Sri Lanka. She's one of those victims that suffered during this civil unrest, civil war between the two factions, the government and the Tamil rebels. And she's a Tamilian too, just like Christian, just like his grandmother. And how that relationship develops between the caretaker, Rani, and his grandmother, how they come to know each other, how they take comfort in each other's company for various reasons. Christian, the protagonist, has also his roots, has also a connection to India, where he goes to study as a PhD scholar, and he meets the love of his life, Anjum, who is his maybe girlfriend, maybe his friend. You will get to know when you read the story. He talks about her also, and the kind of experiences he had in India. But mostly the story is about how it, as a young Sri Lankan, his life is changing in his mind when he sees the war happening through internet, through all those survivor stories, and he eventually goes back to his country from India and works in the north part of the country, where he experiences death and tragedy and longing firsthand. He works for an NGO, and then he goes back to Colombo again, and he lives with his grandmother. But somehow, as luck would have it, there is a death, and because of which he travels from the south of the country, Sri Lanka, to the north. And as he takes this train, the passage to the north, he remembers, he recollects all those experiences that he had in the past, of his grandmother, of his girlfriend, of what is happening in his country, or what happened in his country, of all the difficult lives of all the people who were Tamilians, suffered at the hands of this war, or the difficult life, or because of the civil unrest, because of the fighting between the government and the Tamilians. So all of that happens, and Anouk Arud Pragasam, the writer of this novel, has woven a story in great detail. He talks with flair. He has a way of writing words, writing sentences, pairing words, or sort of combining words in a sentence and bringing out a different aspect to what life is for a common human being. According to me, it is a commentary on the usual life that we have as individuals. I felt after reading this book that I'm reading a normal novel, but somehow it also gave me the feeling that I'm reading something very very profound, very deep, very knowledgeable, that sort of hits you with the feeling that you should feel the agony, feel the pain, feel the misery of these characters, and what all you can do. Can you comfort them in any way whatsoever? According to me, as I said to you earlier, I like the fact that if the story lingers in my mind after I have read the final chapter, after I have closed the book, even once I'm midway in the book, did I really enjoy the plot? Did I really feel for the character if he's at a loss? Or did I want to enjoy with the character if he's happy? So all of those feelings should be there with me. And in this book, I kind of had it, but I lost it also. I did not really cried with Rani when she tells about the loss that she had, that she lost her two young children in the war. So she has this bad experience which she carries throughout her life because she is without a family now. And of her grandmother, of his grandmother who's struggling, of his own loss, where he loves somebody, that the love that is not reciprocated, Anjum's love, and all of that. So for me, that was there, but I couldn't really feel for them, feel for those characters. But yes, there are certain wonderful moments in the story of Skuttamani, especially in the, if I'm pronouncing it right, I'm not sure, in the 7th chapter of the book, you would know exactly what happens to him. He's a separatist leader. So this guy, the writer, has depicted a wonderful story, which I think we should all read about. And I kind of like that particular story. I also like the way he described the passage of time, the way we look at life, the way we, can actually pause for a moment and think about life. All those things are really captivating. The Sri Lankan world, especially when he's traveling by train and looking out of the window and looking at the vegetation and the way he's described it and added an element of Tamil struggle. All of that is very beautiful and I liked it. I'm still yet to finish this book. I think 30-40 pages more to go. But I think this is a very promising book by this young writer who has brought out a different aspect to Sri Lanka. I've not read any Sri Lankan book yet. So I think it is a good book to read. But again, will it be as good as the books that I've read in the past? Some of them are my favorites, like the Fountainhead. I love that book. I don't know why, because probably I relate to that book very much. I like the protagonist, Howard Rourke, or Norwegian Wood, or for that matter, The Thousand Splendid Sun. If you really want to read a novel which is sad, which you feel, you empathize with the character, is that one book, The Thousand Splendid Sun. So I kind of, always want to think about those books that have set the benchmark. And this book is right there. I'm not going to say that it's not there. The writer has a different writing style. He's talking about a real issue. He's brought an element of fiction where he's, woven this story, but this is a wonderful read, and I think you should definitely read it. So these were the 4 books that I've read. You can always buy them from Amazon. This one is, I think, under 300 rupees book, under 400 rupees. This one will cost around 300 rupees. This one will cost around 450 rupees, and this one is about 115 rupees. They're all great stories from great writers, And I think you should definitely pick the books that you think, after reading this review, are interesting for you. Go check that out, and you can buy them from Amazon. So guys, this was about these 4 books and about why you should read books that I've talked about earlier. If you like this review, if you like this video, please go ahead and click on that bell icon and subscribe to my video, and also the notification, so that you get all the videos that I come up with every now and then. You can also comment as to what you liked about this video. You can share it with your friends who probably want to read these books, and you have a wonderful week ahead. It's almost the end of the week. I hope you have a great day and happy reading.